Probably one of the things I'm most interested in and fascinated with are the holy men in India. And they aren't that easy to have contact with because they keep themselves separated from almost everything else. But because I lived in Varanasi, which is one of the big holy cities in India, they did come through quite often. And I found that if you build a relationship with them, that there was a better chance that they would allow you to photograph them. So I would take in some of my photographs and show them, and I would sit with them. The custom is when a holy man comes, he'll put up a tarp or a tent, or he'll be in a little cave, and you can go sit with him. And there might be just a few other people. Usually there's not more than a half a dozen people. And a lot of the time you're sitting in silence, but it's in remembrance of wisdom is why you're sitting. So that's called satsang. That's a very special thing in India. So I did a lot of satsang. Well, I would just go into their areas and sit with them. I got to know them. Lal Baba, who was the one I got to know probably the best, is a Nagi. And they're a very extreme sect of spiritual practices. They have no clothes. They have no dwellings that they actually can go to, like at night, and they never beg. So if they're fed in the day, it's because someone goes and hands them the food. They don't even do that. So they live very, very austere lives. And they're respected, but they're also feared in India because a lot of them have these very esoteric powers and can give you like bad energy. So I noticed that Indians usually keep a distance from them. And this one Lal Baba, who I first saw in Varanasi, was in front of a burning corpse, and he had his body covered with white ash, and he had a stick around his penis, and I saw him from a distance, and I was thinking, what is that? So years later, when I got to know him, I got to know what some of these rituals actually were. One day when I was sitting in satsang with him, he turned to me and he said, "You have camera with you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Tomorrow you come with camera." And so I said, "Okay, Baba." And believe me, if a Nagi invites you to come with a camera, you're going to do everything you can to get there the next day with that camera. So when I walked in the next day, there was a man playing a flute to the left of him. And when I walked in and he saw me, the Nagi saw me, he sort of gave this man an eye, and the rhythm of the flute built up. And then he moved his hand just a little and started to stand up out of a sitting position. And the flute player, opened the basket and a snake slithered out, a very big snake. And the Nagi put his arm down like a branch, and the snake slithered up his arm around his neck. And then he dropped his loincloth, so he was totally naked with white ash on his body. He took a staff and wrapped it around his penis and started moving it from right to left, with the flute playing and the snake all over him. So he was basically celebrating his celibacy, and this is a practice that they do in honor of that. And so I was beyond grateful that he allowed me to photograph that. And then there were many, many other holy men who came through India. There was one man who was 112. He just popped out of the Ganges like a teenager, and he was just shaking his body, his beard, and the water was spraying. And I asked him if I could photograph him, and he allowed me to as well. And they do practices that keep them very youthful, which is apparent when you get to meet them. And then when you go into very, very esoteric places like in the mountains, in the Himalayas, there are caves that they live in. And these are even more inaccessible. So I also had the experience of meeting them up in the mountains, and I went to a Maha Kumbh Mela where there were thousands and thousands of holy men parading, because that also is part of their culture. The Vedas say that they should do everything they can to come to a Kumbh Mela. So any opportunity I've had, I've gotten to meet a lot of different holy men. I got to photograph the Dalai Lama at one time too, so that was nice.